Welcome to Season 2 of Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al, the podcast that brings you timely and practical stories straight from the paddock. From sowing to shearing, fire to flood, and everything in between. We're here when it matters most. Each episode taps into real experiences, expert voices, and grounded advice that helps you stay ahead on farm. I'm Alister from the Gippsland Ag Group, a grassroots, farmer-led network in Gippsland, focusing on soil, grain and fodder, pasture and livestock. We're here to support producers in building resilient and profitable enterprises across our region. So let's dig in. Welcome to Dig In Deeper. We have Simon Faulkner from Merdeduke here. How are you, Simon?
Good, thanks, Al.
Now, for people that don't know you, who is Simon Faulkner?
Someone who's very passionate about agriculture. I've been involved in agriculture my whole career, mostly down in Western Victoria, originally from the Riverina in New South Wales at Deniliquin. And when I was a young fellow, we moved down to Geelong. And that's, farming and agriculture is all I've wanted to do my entire life, really. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that.
Now, you're most probably known for Merdeduke, the Angus stud, but you just said the Riverina, so you must be a sheep man at heart too, are you?
Yeah, that's right. That's where my true passion lies is in sheep and wool. Got a pretty strong family history in the wool industry, but it's something I've had to put on the back burner over the years, and I've been corrupted by the cattle world, and Angus cattle is my current passion, as well as soil health and soil, subsoiling and soil health.
Yep. Now, I've done a little bit of digging around on you the last couple of days, and I was also surprised that you run a bit of a piggery as part of the operations down there.
Yes, we're Otway Pork. We're the home of Otway Pork, which is a free-range piggery, or range bred. I shouldn't say free-range because we can't say that. They're actually range bred. We breed the pigs outdoors, and then we finish them in an eco-shelter. And it's a fantastic system because not only is it animal welfare friendly, we have some great byproducts from the piggery that we put back into our farming country. We compost the manure out of the eco-shelters, and that makes a really good natural fertiliser. So it's a great circular economy, if you like to use those terms.
I think that having something that you can produce on farm yourself, very local, is going to be very beneficial, especially because you said soil health there as well. So I'm assuming that was part of the decision to go down that route, I guess.
Yeah, there's, because they're free range, you have a huge nutrient load. We don't, all the food comes in for the pigs, and so you've got a net import of nutrient into the system, and so the pigs fertilise our farming country, and it has to be on some of the well-drained, better farming country. So it's like putting a couple of 100 kilos of nitrogen, 40 or 50 units of phosphorus and potassium, and then we can grow some bumper crops the year after, or the subsequent years from our when the pigs have been on our country.
So just a quick question on that. Do you move that manure somewhere else, or do you move the pigs and then grow on the pens?
There's two systems. The farrowing happens in the paddock, it's a wagon wheel configuration, and they stay there basically for 2 years. And so you've got a net import of nutrient into that farming country. But as we wean the pigs, they go into eco-shelters, and that's a straw-based system where we add pig manure to straw that comes out of our cropping operation. So it's a waste product that we're value adding. We add nutrient from the pig manure and compost it down and send it back into our pastures and cropping operations. So it's twofold. It's in the breeding units. It's a direct input of nutrient, and then out of the eco shelters, that can go further afield. That can go to any of our country. So it's a really cool system.
And what are you growing after you spread that pig manure? What sort of crops are you growing?
We grow the traditional winter, the high rainfall crops: canola, wheat, barley. In the country and that we take over from the breeding units, there's so much nutrient there that we grow two bigger canola crops. So We've moved towards putting a multi-purpose or a dual-purpose cereal in that we can graze and utilise that extra biomass that we're growing, and then take it through to harvest after we've grazed it and kept it under control, rather than use growth regulators, which we went down that path for a little while. We thought this is a more natural approach to actually turn excess dry matter into wool, beef, and sheep meat. So it's a really, really good system.
Now, I remember reading an article, and it was nearly 50 years ago, a piggery was on a site and they were still finding nutrient-rich soils underneath it. Have you ever done some long-term testing on what nutrients still available, especially the micros, I guess?
Yeah, that's really important, and we need to use that nutrient up. It's part of the deal with running outdoor piggeries. You just can't load your country up and put too much nutrient in, and so that's why it has to be a systems approach. And you can't have the pigs on the country for too long, and then you have to have a plan for dealing with that nutrient. But I could imagine if it's static in the one spot for a long time, then the nutrient buildup would be huge. So it's a very specific system, and it works beautifully the way it's evolved.
Yeah, it sounds like a nice problem to have, is too much nutrient. I don't think too many people will be having that problem around this area. Let's talk about soil health, because you said that was one of your passions as well.
Yep.
How do you explain soil health as a foundation or fundamental?
I see the soil as the engine room of any agricultural operation. If we haven't got strong, healthy, robust soils, then your farming system isn't going to be strong, healthy, and robust. It's as simple as that. Particularly in the high rainfall zones, because we have enough moisture, apart from the last couple of years. The majority of the time we have enough moisture and to sustain good agricultural practice and production, but we are limited by the health of our soils, particularly our subsoils. That's where the real problem is. Farmers have done an amazingly good job at dealing with the top 10 centimetres of our soil profile. We've corrected acidity, sodicity, nutrient imbalances, and we've got that really humming. But it's that next 10 to 20 centimetres where the issues are. And it's hard to deal with.
In your property, what's the next 10 centimetres look like? So 10 to 20, what sort of problems are you facing down there?
The first barrier, a lot of our country has a bleach layer and a buckshot layer, and that is a symptom of waterlogging, and it's a hostile subsoil, structureless clay underneath your topsoil, and the water just pools, and that's where waterlogging comes from. The buckshot and the bleach layer is a chemical reactions and physical reactions that indicate you've got a problem with your subsoils. So it's a real challenge, and it's hard to deal with. You can't deal with it with applications of gypsum, for example, from the surface. It's too deep. The gypsum won't move through the profile. So we have to work at a different method of ameliorating our subsoils.
So Merdeduke was one of the first places that you did start doing a lot of this work, is it, or have you done this before?
My introduction to soil health at Merdeduke some 30 years ago was the introduction of raised beds, or I like to call it ditch farming, because surface drainage was the issue at that stage. Traditionally, Western Victoria didn't grow crops. We used to grow a few oats for sheep feed and a bit of barley, spring barley. But year in, year out, our winters got too wet and we had waterlogging issues. So Bruce Whiteman of the Department of Ag came up with the idea, along with a couple of other soil scientists, that if we move the surface water off the paddock, then that surface waterlogging will be rectified. So that was the start, and the first of the raised beds in Australia happened at Merdeduke and some of the surrounding properties, and that transformed cropping as we know it today. High rainfall zone cropping, that was the catalyst for getting it going.
Keep on thinking raised garden beds. Is it a similar concept as that? You're getting it up off the level of where it should be?
It's yes and no. It's really, we're not raising the beds really. It's really putting a drain. Originally it started every about 1.5 metres. We used to put a drain in, and then as soil health improved and soil structure improved, we've moved out to 3 metres, and there's a drain, a physical drain every 3 metres. One of the other benefits was it forced us into controlled traffic, because you didn't want to drive across all the ruts in your paddock, and that had a beneficial impact as well. Just using the same tram lines. If you look at a heat map of where your vehicles go over a paddock, there's not much of the paddock that, unless you're using controlled traffic, that you don't drive on, and that has a really detrimental effect to soil compaction and soil health. So raised beds forced us into controlled traffic, which had the flow-on effect of helping increase our yields in the high rainfall zone.
Yep. So you still do that raised bed method, do you?
Still use raised bed on a lot of our country.
Yep.
The really top farmers laser grading their paddocks, putting raised beds in as well, and that's the Rolls-Royce treatment in our region over at Geelong.
And so those furrows have to be put in every planting, do they? Or once they're there, you can leave them for a couple of years?
The rotation, it fits in with the rotation. People usually renovate their beds before canola, because canola is pretty sensitive to waterlogging, and so you can get 2 or 3 years out of a bed, and then it's just a renovation. It's not a complete reforming. Although if you go down the land planning exercise, then you have to reform the beds as well.
What other soil amelioration works have you done in your time down there?
Yeah, the exciting bit, the bit I've been really excited about is the subsoil amelioration, and basically that's taking organic matter and putting it down at depth in the profile. The secret to that is doing your due diligence, finding out where the constraints are in the soil profile. As I said earlier, most farmers have done a fantastic job in the top 10 centimetres, and most agronomists have assisted in identifying the constraints there. It's the next 20 centimetres that's the issue. In our area, we've got that bleached layer and buckshot layer, and it sits on top of really constrained clay soil. So the subsoil amelioration work we do, it involves ripping, but also putting organic matter into the top of the B horizon, what we call the B horizon, the top of the clay zone.
So it's through that bleach layer you put in it?
Through the bleach layer, and cracks and shatters the top of the clay layer.
And how far down is that, roughly, for you guys?
It depends. It's between 20 and 30 centimetres. I was looking at a paddock this morning here in Gippsland, and it's pretty similar. It's around that 20 to 30 centimetres. If we go too deep into the profile, into the clay, we entomb the organic matter, and the plant roots won't reach it, especially in a dispersive clay. As soon as it gets wet, it collapses back down again, and it's inhospitable to roots. And the roots of the actively growing roots of the plants is the secret to the system. That's what does the heavy lifting, changes the structure of the soil. It aggregates the particles in and creates pores and spaces in the soil profile to let air in, to let water infiltrate into the profile, but also allow it to be extracted by the plants. So it's really important to get those roots down into the subsoils, which is the limiting factor at the moment.
Now, I've got a couple of questions in the one question before I forget. Firstly, what sort of plants are you planting on top of those ameliorations to get those roots in there? And secondly, are you looking at year 1, 2 or 3, or how long does this amelioration last for the returns on investment?
Yeah, you can grow any crops pretty much on top of a subsoil paddock. There are issues with establishment because some in a really clay paddock, you can bring clay and it can be cloddy, and you have to break those clods back down. And we have found that canola is not the ideal because it can be sown too deeply, and so emergence is an issue. So our suggestion is to use a cereal in that first year, because you won't have as much trouble with a germination and establishment of your crop. Summer, we were discussing it this morning in the paddock. In a lot of ways, an amelioration and then a summer crop with multi-species. There might be, we've trialled soybeans, millets, sunflowers, tillage radish, and a bit of a shotgun approach works really well. You've got a range of root types and rooting depths, and over summer, as long as you've got the moisture, you've got a warm environment with moisture, those plants grow really well and seek out that amendment. And then there's plenty of roots down there, and that's where the hard work starts. That's where the particles are stuck together and improve that structure.
What about that return on investment? How long? Because I'm assuming it sounds like a fairly expensive process to do that first deep rip in.
Yeah, look, it's not cheap. We say it's a ballpark figure of a couple of $1,000s a hectare, and that's a full contract rate using 15 tonnes of per hectare of amendment, and how long's a piece of string, I guess, is how far do you have to cart the amendment? If you've got your own feedlot on property or pig sheds, you can make your own compost. Well, that cost comes back down. But if you have to bring recycled organics from Melbourne, get feedlot waste from a feedlot 150 k's away, the cost mounts up, and part of the deal is in our soils they're dispersive, so we need some gypsum in there to help with fixing of the soil. Our soils depths are acidic as well, so we need some lime in the mix as well. So depending on how far you have to cart your lime and gypsum, that all adds to the cost. So it's not inexpensive. The general rule of thumb is a 30% increase in grain yields. Essen Tavakoldi, who is a soil scientist up at Wagga, he's done a lot of research into subsoil amelioration around Rand and Wagga, and the trial work and the science that he's developed up there shows that it's around that 3-year payback period. And you can expect sort of a 25 to 30% increase in yield. We haven't nailed completely the grain yield, the increase in grain yield, the potential. We're not fulfilling the potential of the grain yield at this stage. I think our crop agronomy is not quite up to speed. Dry matter, we were discussing it this morning in a livestock situation. Where does fixing the subsoils come in, and it's about growing more dry matter out of season so you can hit premium markets with your livestock. We see commonly 50% increase in dry matter on ameliorated paddocks. So that's pretty exciting.
That's massive,
yeah. Yeah, extend your growing season. Later into the season, these paddocks tend to be greener for longer. So that just gives you that bit of wriggle room to finish that last batch of lambs or last batch of steers. And it's an area that there hasn't been a lot of funding in, but I think it's got great potential. Is increasing pasture productivity, and the increase in animal productivity and production, and targeting out of season markets.
Well, it's harder and harder to buy the next door neighbour these days, so going down is probably the next viable option. One last question on that. How many years before you have to go around again, or once you've done that, can you establish?
Yeah, that, because the process is relatively new, we're not 100% sure how quickly we need to go back. On my own farm at Geelong, I went back after 4 years, and the machine I used had metre spacings, and so you get an amelioration effect around what we call the sausage, where the amendment goes.
Is it like a mole hole?
Mole drain?
Mole drain, yeah.
Yeah. And you can dig it up. It's probably the size of a tennis ball in diameter, and you can see it, and it stays there. The carbon in the amendment stays there, and you can dig it up sort of 2, 3, 4 years later. Because it's a metre wide, there's a gap in between. And when you're in the header, you can see it's like corrugated iron. You can see the response over the rip lines, the amendment lines, and you can see in 50 centimetres from either side, you haven't had an effect on increase in yield. So my farm at Geelong, I've come back and gone into row at 50 centimetres, and we've just seen an explosion of increase in yield over the last couple of years. So that's really exciting. We've seen one of the exciting things about it, and in this world of where we need to be sequestering carbon into our agricultural systems, we've seen an increase in soil carbon from 0.4 to over 2 in a 5-year period. We need to do more work, and I've only witnessed that in a couple of sites where we've actually measured it. But it's really exciting. It was an unexpected benefit to the system, an increase in soil carbon at depth. And the beauty of it is at depth. It's 30 to 40 centimetres underground, and so it's going to be there. It'd be very difficult to burn that carbon, so to speak. I mean, you look at the last 2 years of drought in Western Victoria, and I suspect our carbon levels in our topsoil have declined quite rapidly because of the seasons we've had. But at 30 to 40 centimetres, I can't see that those carbon sources would have been as much threat as the carbon on the surface.
All right, we'll keep on that carbon theme because that was one of my questions later on. Could we talk about CFOP value? I don't even know what that acronym is. Can you talk us about that acronym and help us as producers move from confusion, I guess, into action?
Yeah, it's the Carbon Farming Outreach Program is what it stands for, a federal government initiative, and it's fantastic. In that its design is to educate and inform our farming community about this whole carbon story, which is a bit frightening in some ways, but they've run a whole lot of people who have influence in the farming world through a series of courses to get them up to speed, and it's their job to spread the word through the farming communities. And it's not all about selling carbon credits, which may or may not be of interest to lots of farming people, but it's more about how do we farm in a carbon-friendly way without reducing productivity and the viability of farms. That's my take on it. That's my personal take on it. And there are a lot of things that we can do which are just damn good farming activities that contribute to a better carbon emissions statement, so to speak.
Well, give us the top 2 things that we can do that help our carbon emission number, but also our farm production as well.
Yeah. Look, in the cattle industry, I'll talk about the cattle industry because I'm highly involved with cattle. There's 2 things that stand out to me is being breed well and feed well. They're the 2 things. If your genetics are right and your pastures and the way you feed your animals are right, then it allows you to turn off animals faster, and there can be no better way of reducing your carbon emissions than removing methane belching animals from your farming system. Classic example, we had a client that sent some steers through the MSA program, the JBS program the other day. They were 14-month-old steers. They were finished off grass, killed at 14 months. They dressed out at 370 kilos. Normally, in an average system with average genetics, they would have possibly been another 12 months in a farming system before they were killed. So these guys, 14 months, he buys really good genetics, is very particular in the genetics, uses EBVs and all the tools that are out there to inform cattle breeders as to what they're buying. But he also has perennial pastures that are well fertilised, well managed, and allowed him in a drought year to turn off an exceptional run of steers that weren't hanging around belching methane for another 8 to 10 to 12 months. So a really good story.
Well, I think the story is a little bit better than that too, because JBS, they were hooked at, weren't they?
Yep.
And that you were saying, or there's some numbers saying that they were the best or the highest MSA graded steers that JBS has ever received. Is that correct?
Yeah. From what JBS is searching through their records, and the last time I spoke to them, they came back with an MSA index of 66, a bit over 66, and JBS were thinking that that's probably the highest average for a batch of steers that they've ever seen. And one steer came back at 71, which they think may be the highest ever. The highest ever indexing steer through their system. So
do you want to just explain a little bit about, for people that are listening unsure of what the MSA grading actually is made up of too?
Yeah, the MSA grading is a system of it's basically a quality assurance. So the edict quality of the beef is good, and it takes into account the younger the animal is, usually the more tender it is, the better eating it is. It takes into effect marbling, intramuscular fat, weight gain. It's a whole lot of different things that are put together to come up with a rating system for which then flows through the supply chain. JBS have got a number of programs, and the programs, the high grading programs, which they get a premium for, are high indexing MSA graded beef. They marble, they're young animals, they've got good yield. It's a win for them, and hopefully they get a premium for it, and hopefully there will be a premium flow back through to the consumer or the producers. And it's a guarantee to the consumer that this is going to be a damn good steak, basically.
And one of the reasons on farm that we want to be picking animals that grow quicker, not only for a lower emitting animal, but also they're going to be less grass or fodder over their lifetime to get to that stage, aren't they?
That's dead right. And one of the things that we've, if I put my Merdeduke Angus hat on, we've started putting bulls through a net feed efficiency testing program to find those animals that eat less but put on more weight. And it's surprising. We've done three batches of nearly 70 animals through a program over the last 18 months. And there are animals that convert feed at a 4-to-1 ratio, whereas I think it's widely accepted that most cattle do an 8-to-1 ratio. And in the seasons that we've had, the last 2 years of drought, financially, if we had all our animals were converting at 4-to-1, they're eating less food, but they're still producing plenty of meat. We can get them off earlier. So when we've run out of feed, they're gone. There's a methane reduction. They're in the market and off our books quickly. So there's a financial incentive there. It's just a really good story. Some of the animals we've put through are eating 22 kilos a day, whereas the best of the animals are eating 8 kilos a day. And that's huge.
Now, talk a little bit more about Vitality, because you were sharing briefly over a cuppa before, and you were surprised, just as I was, to learn the range on some of the animals and the ability to pick out some of those better doing animals that are eating less but still putting it on weight. So what sort of benefit for you as a stud principal, I guess, to be able to see those numbers?
Yeah, look, we think it's moving forward. It's going to be absolutely critical for a number of reasons. It was really drawn to our attention by one of the feedlots up in New South Wales, the Hell's Gate up at Hay. It's a 22,000 head feedlot, and they do F1 Wagyus potentially. The value of those carcasses ranges from sort of $3,000 to $8,000 fed over the same period of time. And they've crunched the numbers and they said if they can take away those animals that A, don't marble well, and then B, don't convert feed into beef, then there's a huge saving for them. For them, with their 22,000 head of cattle on feed, a very small, a 10% increase in net feed efficiency is $1 million off their bottom line, which is really significant. For them, it's money that they can afford to source the right cattle to come into their program. And we're seeing that they've got a whole lot of cooperator herds, and they're now talking about sourcing bulls and developing a herd that's got a really good net feed intake, so it feeds into their program well, and paying a premium for those people who have got a herd that's set up for their criteria.
So you said you've got a couple of bulls that are right in that really high feed efficiency, and so what's your plan with those bulls over the next little while? Are you hoping to do a bit more work with them or see what happens with their progeny?
Yeah, look, we are. Vitelli's got a worldwide population and a reference, and compared to some of the other animals worldwide, we've still got a long way to go.
That's on a myriad of different breeds, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it is. It's across all breeds. They've got a top 100, and there's a few Australian bulls in there. We haven't got the linkages with the program yet. I think that's part of the problem. We haven't got the genetic linkages and data linkages to give our animals the accuracy that they need. But the bulls that we've got, they're at the top of that eat less and put on more weight. We've folded a number of those young bulls back into our breeding herd, and we hope to lift the whole profile of our herd to have good feed efficiency, enough marbling, enough EMA, and enough carcass weight to breed bulls for the Hell's Gate program and other customers. That at this stage, there doesn't seem to be a trade-off that we've discovered. I'm sure there will be for focusing on those four traits. So it's pretty exciting times. We've got our core objectives, but part of what we're doing is it's neatly folded into our core breeding objectives, which is pretty exciting. And we can now identify these animals by using this net feed intake testing facility. And the really exciting bit is we can now measure methane emissions at the same time. And there's a huge correlation between feed intake and methane emissions. So if we get these low intake animals, then their methane emissions are going to be low as well. Mm-hmm. So we can start building that into our carbon accounting on farm, and that's going to be really important to know. Farmers are going to need to know what their baseline figure is, and the supply chain is going to be asking. It's already asking for that in a lot of cases. What is your baseline carbon footprint?
Just a quick practical question. In that feed system where they weigh the feed and the daily gains and capture the methane, can we then use, if we buy genetics or bulls with those numbers, can we use them directly on our farm, or do we have to do some sort of similar system measuring our own methane emissions?
Good question. I'm not 100% sure on the answer on that. I suspect you could put a case to, I'm sure the current models wouldn't pick it up, but some of the banks are now asking what's your carbon footprint and what steps are you taking towards reducing your carbon footprint. And I think you could develop a pretty good case to say, we've identified methane emissions in our livestock enterprise as being significant. These are the steps we're taking. We're sourcing bulls with low carbon emission or methane emissions on the back of high net feed intake efficiency. So I think it'd be a hard argument to toss. So I think it'd be a valuable tool in having that discussion with the supply chain and some of our rural lenders.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw now to a question that I know you'll have lots of answers to. A quarterback, one of your bulls, he's been one of the more widely used bulls in Australia of recent, hasn't he?
Yes, we're pretty proud of the performance of quarterback. 2024, he was the most highly used Angus bull in the breed. So it was a bit of a coup. We're super proud of it because he's a bull that we've bred ourselves. It goes back through the maternal line. That was the secret of his success. It's a strong maternal line through several generations of donor cows that met our criteria, and quarterback's been the icing on the cake with some tinkering on the sire side of things to improve IMF and a few things like that. So super proud of quarterback's record. The other benefit, he fits into that northern beef industry because they're slick skinned, they drop their hair quickly, and heat tolerance. In a day where animal welfare, we're under the microscope, to have some tools to say that we are actually doing something about heat tolerance and tick resistance and animal welfare in the north. To have a tool like quarterback with the traits measured, the coat type measured, and an EBV out there, even if it's only a research EBV, that's really important.
Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned there his coat score. What other things do you like about quarterback when you're talking about him?
Yeah, well, the calving ease is number one. That he's a dual purpose bull. He's got a really short gestation length, which tends to give good calving ease. The coat type is great for the north, and he's a high carcass merit bull too. He's over 5 for IMF, which there are not many bulls out there, and he's got top 15% growth traits at the same time. So he's a rare combination of a lot of really good traits. If you want to pick on something, he could have a little bit more muscle in his hindquarter. If you were looking purely on phenotype, that's what you'd pick on him. But he is a big bull too. To have the calving ease that he has, he's a 1,200, 1,300 kilo bull when he's in good condition. So that's a big animal. Plenty of frame. If you're in the feedlot industry and you want some frame to hang meat on, you're going to get progeny that they've got high carcass merit, good weight gains, and tolerate the heat in a feedlot situation because of the good coat type.
Well, you didn't actually know this, but you're here to assess some of our cattle this afternoon at the Gippsland Ag Group. And I mentioned as the heifers were walking down the laneway that we actually use quarterback straws in them. So in about 8 months' time, we'll actually have some of these quarterback calves on the ground. We're pretty excited to see what they turn out to be. But yeah, you're actually going down to assess these cattle this afternoon. Is that correct?
I'm going down, and we're going to have a bit of an assessment school and talk through what I see, how I assess cattle, and then try and relate it back to EBVs and what. Yeah, sometimes what you see in the paddock, you can't, like net feed intake, you can't identify that by just looking at an animal. You need the paperwork associated, and in a lot of the cattle breeds, there's we've got this tool, these EBVs, which inform your breeding decisions. But when you're not used to it, it's a pretty complicated system. And so to talk through it and understand what the paperwork means and then relate it back to the animal is a good exercise. structural soundness and structural EBVs. We'll run through some of that when we go down to the yards later on and see live different foot structures, claw shape, and then see if they match up with the EBVs. So you can look through catalogues and say, no, I need to improve my foot structure. I'm only going to take the top 15% of animals in for claw shape, for example. And it's a learning part. I'm learning all the time. And one of the greatest things that's been released recently is mature cow condition and cow height. Originally, there was only a mature cow weight, but it didn't say whether the animal was a frame score 7 or a frame score 5. It didn't relate to the condition of the animal or the height of the animal. So all the breeds are refining, or breed plan are refining the information that they're providing to producers, which is fantastic.
Now, you've been in the industry for a long time looking at EBVs. Someone that's new to the industry, where do you start when there's so much information out there?
A lot of the breed societies have lots of information on their websites, but you need to find someone who's a seed stock, whether it's sheep or cattle, a seed stock producer that has the time to run through it with you. And there's no dumb questions. And if a seed stock producer rolls their eyes, in my view, when you ask a question, what they might see as a naive question, you've got the wrong seed stock producer. It's our responsibility as seed stock producers to come and say, Al, where's your understanding? What can I help you with? And run through it, so that seed stock producers should be a good starting point to run through. And everyone's got a different base of knowledge when you look at paperwork and EBVs, and it is complicated until you get your head around it. Most important thing to me is you need to know where they rank in the breed, the percentile bands, whether it's the top. You can get a growth figure for plus 100. Doesn't really make much sense unless you know that plus 100 is in the top 10% of the breed. If it's 50%, if that's breed average, I'll probably have to go to plus 200 to get the top of the tree for that growth trait. So the percent, and that's I think the thing that a lot of people miss is the percentile bands, where they fit in the breed. The next big question is, should we have a multi-breed system evaluation where you compare Herefords with Charolais with Angus to Brahmins, so you don't have, because all the breeds are different. The numbers from Charolais is different to Angus is different to Hereford, and that's a source of confusion. So MLA are talking about trying to develop a multi-breed evaluation similar to what they've done in the sheep industry, which I think works quite well.
We'll have to put your phone number up later on, because it sounds like you're the type of person that someone like myself would really benefit from calling for that information, because you can get lost in the numbers sometimes. And I think it's a really good point you make, that talk to someone that knows, and if they're not going to be patient with us new people, they'll probably find somewhere else to start the journey. So very good. Now, bringing it back down to Bairnsdale, when you talk about Merdeduke, the property, what parts of the system do you see can work well down here?
Obviously, the soil constraints in your subsoil are very similar. And from what I've seen, you've got issues with waterlogging, you've got issues with hostile subsoils, and the associated lack of productivity and production from those constraints. And that's probably, it's mixed farming. I've been through dairy country, I've been through sheep country, I've been through cattle country. So it's very similar. And there's cropping as well. Probably not a huge amount of cropping, but to me it's the same issues, and it revolves around your soils. Basically, that's where the greatest improvement will come from. We can do nothing about the weather, but what we can do something about is fixing the subsoil constraints, and perhaps breaking down our traditional 12-month view of our farming system with the way that our climate patterns and rainfall events have changed. It's a bit of a lottery. And I say to my clients, break it down into quarterly assessments. Get to the end of March and assess what are the threats, what are the opportunities. Like at the moment, you guys have had good rain in the last month, so potentially there's an opportunity to maybe do some mixed species cover crops, summer cover crops, which you may not have had the opportunity over the last couple of summers because it's been too dry. But you've got an opportunity right at the moment with good moisture. We haven't had much warmth yet.
It's coming 32 on Thursday.
32. Well, there you go. That's fixed that. Well, yeah. So, and timeliness is everything. If you make that decision, don't procrastinate. Get on, and if you're going to put a summer crop in, get it done while the opportunity's there. Number of people I've worked with another hat on when I've been working with Southern Farming Systems with summer crops and the opportunity of sowing into canola stubbles. It's no good to wait 10 days because once the canopy's gone and you might have a rainfall event, you have to do it within a couple of days. Otherwise, you lose that opportunity for a germination. So you need to be well prepared, set up, and pull the trigger. Make the assessment. Yes, there's subsoil moisture still there. Yes, there's enough moisture in the topsoil to get a germination, and bang, away you go. Which is difficult if we like finishing harvest and heading to the beach for a holiday or the cricket. Then, the last thing you want to do is drag yourself back from the beach. And
Now, one last thing before we get to our signature question. Everyone's on a bit of a carbon journey at the minute. It's popular in the media and with farming circles.
Yep.
If we haven't even contemplated it yet, where do we start, and where in 6 months' time we hope we'll have some numbers on different things?
I guess there's two sides of the road on where to with carbon for people that haven't really started it. It is what we can physically do, but also we need to. I'd encourage everyone to get a baseline figure to know what your carbon footprint is, because we're going to be asked about it into the future. It doesn't mean we have to be net zero and those sorts of things. There's food security is the big overrider of all this whole carbon story. When we cannot go too hard on carbon at the expense of food security, so we need to pull our weight as a sector. And part of that supply chain is going to ask, they don't want to bring on scope 3 carbon and pollution, for want of a better term, into their businesses. And the starting point is to know what the intensity of the products you produce, whether it be wool, beef, grain, pigs, lamb, whatever it may be, you need to know the intensity on those products. So there are a lot of calculators out there which are not too complicated to use, that give you a rough baseline and get you thinking about your carbon emissions and your carbon footprint. The other side of the question is, well, what can I do in my day-to-day farming practice to reduce my carbon emissions on farm? And we've discussed about buying genetics that have good feed efficiency, and coupled with that will be low carbon emission or methane emissions associated with that. They're the sort of things that you can do. Store carbon in your subsoils, improve the carbon, sequester carbon into your soil through better farming practices. They're the sort of things that we do that tick the box for carbon, but also increase productivity.
I think that's a really good point. We don't do these different aspects of carbon efficiency for that number. It actually improves our farm efficiency and productivity. So that's nice. Now, the question I ask all my guests at the very end is, what is something you've learnt recently that surprised you? We're often learning things
Yeah.
and often not too surprised, but every so often there's something that really surprised us. Have you got one off the top of your head?
Yeah. I've just been lucky enough to go to Zimbabwe for a 3-week or a bit over 3 weeks drive through Zimbabwe. We went from one corner of Zimbabwe to the other, and we pulled up before we forded a river and a nice sandy track, and it was just killing 10 minutes. And I looked down, and there were a whole lot of footprints on the track, and there was a mob of impala had been through, and nice neat little footprints. And then there must have been some buffalo go through, bigger footprints. Then there was an elephant footprint that went over the top of all those footprints. And then on top of the elephant footprint, there was a lion footprint. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. This was just after dawn, and we're just sitting. It was magnificent, beautiful. We had all these footprints that had come over the night and early morning. I was sort of thinking back towards farming and agriculture. That everything we do leaves a footprint. It's the consequence of that action that caused the footprint that's really important. We drove a bit further, and the pride of lions had caught a buffalo, and had killed the buffalo. So, yeah, if I looked at the footprints before, I didn't know that there was going to be serious consequence for the buffalo, that the lions were tracking him. The elephants, not far from where the buffaloes were, the elephants were in the river, completely oblivious to what had happened to the buffalo and the lion pride. And they were big, robust, healthy family, strong community. They weren't worried. But the poor old buffalo was lagging behind, and the lions had nabbed him. And then the rest of our convoy came through. 4 vehicles went past, all the footprints had gone, and all we were left with was 4-wheel drive prints. And I thought, right, yeah, humans have a big impact they leave a big impact and a lot of footprints in this world. Nature gives us, we've got to study nature to find out the nature of those footprints and the consequences of those footprints. So I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, nature will give us a lot of guidance as to whether we're doing the consequence of our actions, and we've got to be really careful not to just roll over the top of our environment and nature, and have a strong community. That elephant community was, they were robust. They didn't give a damn about a pride of lions because they were strong, healthy, fit, well drilled. So there were a lot of, it was a good experience just sitting there, taking in the world and seeing nature in action.
Yeah, it's a lovely story to finish on, Simon. I feel we've only scratched the surface with your knowledge, and really appreciate you coming in. And I look forward to tonight with our little workshop down in the yards. But thanks very much.
Pleasure.
We'll catch up with you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks very much, Al. It's been a pleasure.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.
This episode was delivered with funding support from the Commonwealth of Australia through the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water under the Carbon Farming Outreach Program in collaboration with Grower Group Alliance.